Hello students, welcome back. We're going to do a quick walkthrough of the hotkeys or shortcuts on your keyboard to use in Photoshop, and then I'll also be doing another video where we go through and talk about the shortcuts for Procreate and trying to use that. So let's get started. Keyboard shortcuts. Number one, we have zoom in, Control plus. So if we move over here to this student project from the value, if I hit Control and plus, you can see it zooms into the project. Control minus is going to zoom out, and you can keep going for quite a ways. And if I want to fit that actual image to the full size of the screen, no matter how big it is, if I hit Control 0, boom, it has fit it as big as possible on that screen. Now, if I am zoomed in, let's say I'm looking at little details, right? And I want to move across the image. I want to drag it left and right so I can get to, let's say, the top part where the eyes are. If I hold down the space bar and then I drag, you can see I'm slowly moving up towards that eyeball section. So space bar is the way to hold that down, and you can drag, okay? To draw a line up or down, let's go back to full-size image. So Control 0 again. Here's my brush. I'm going to make it smaller. Now, if I want to draw straight up and down or left and right, if I hold Shift and then I draw, then it will do that. So if I push Shift, let's say, yeah, I got a color. Shift, and then I start to draw. Notice how it makes that line go up and down. Or if I wanted it to go side to side, I hold Shift, and then I draw. Whoops, I did the click Shift. But notice that this is just going horizontal, okay? That is a quick way to draw a straight line, vertical or horizontal, is hold down Shift first, and then draw across. We're going to hit our next one, Control Z, the undo button. Control Z, one line's gone, Control Z, the other line's gone. Now, the other way, and I talked about this a little bit last time, if I want to make a line from this point up here in the top corner down to where the shadow is, if I hit click up in the top corner and then I move down and I hold Shift when I click, it's going to draw that line across. And if I want to draw it back to another side, I hit Shift, draw it across. I move it back to the original, hit Shift. I just made a triangle depending on the brush. So I have a soft brush, but that kind of made a nice, space, and I could fill that color in. I could put something inside of that. So Control Z, Control Z, Control Z. We'll make those disappear. Okay. What does it say? Yeah, between 2 points. Right click gets you your menu. Now, if we want to make our brush bigger or smaller, right now we have a small brush. So if I hit the right bracket, the size goes up. If I hit the small bracket, the left bracket, it goes down. If I want a big brush, now I can paint with a big brush. If I want a little brush, then I can paint with a smaller brush. And I can keep making it smaller. Okay? So that's a very quick, easy way to make your brush bigger or smaller. Some of the Wacom tablets and the different holders, they will have buttons on the side that you can put to brush size or brush opacity. I tend to just use the keyboard because it's what I'm used to. So Control Z will get rid of a couple of those. Let's make our brush bigger. Now, if I want to sample a color, say I want this white color because I want to paint something up there, I'm on my brush tool. So here's my brush tool right there. Good old letter B on your keyboard or the little icon. And if I'm above the white and I hold down Alt, and we talked about this before, all of a sudden my brush goes from a circle and it turns into a sampler. And if I click, it's going to take that color, and now I can paint with that gray color. And say I want a different one. I sample. Then I can paint with that on top of there. So it's a very quick way to sample a color and not jump out of your brush tool. You just sample a color and then you come back. Control Z, Control Z, that's gone. So that's the top keyboard shortcuts up there. These other ones they usually call quick tool keys. So that's like if I want to jump between a tool from one to another, okay? So quick tool keys. I'm on brush right now, so let's move to the next one. If I hit the letter V on my keyboard, now I have that top tool, the move tool. It's going to allow me to move a color or a layer around anywhere I want. And I didn't get it exactly right. Control Z, that'll put it right back where it was. The next one, we'll go back to B for brush. P for pen tool. There we go. And then I can draw I don't know why they still have this as a brush. So it's remembering the last thing or the default. So there is a line that you can make that draws peanuts along the line. And I don't know why. It's very gimmicky, but it's still a default. So we have, if we zoom in, small peanut shapes along those lines. The beauty of using a pen tool is you can draw a very precise line, and you don't, it's kind of like an Illustrator. You can pick those points, you can curve them in between. There's a time and a place for that. We're not going to really focus on that. That's something you're going to probably see and enjoy more in DigApps 1. So I'm going to get rid of that. W for Magic Wand. If I want to select something, I move to the wand. If I click on it, it's clicking all of that shadow. If I move down to the other area, it's clicking down there. Now, this isn't full screen, so I'm going to just pop into full screen really quick. And when full screen is here, you have some tools to change the sampling area. You can have it so that it selects everything from one side to another. You can have it so it selects from any layer, or you can have it so that it only select from the layer that you're on. Right now, I think I'm on anything, so notice that it selected the top here. If I click on Sample All Layers, now if I click on one of these smaller areas, let's get off this. If I want just this little piece right here, notice that it does that. My tolerance is at 32, which is kind of high. Sometimes if you want a precise area, you might go like 5 or 6. Then when you select, it's got a smaller area. It won't jump into other tones that are not the same. See how it just selected that? It just selected that. It's selecting certain areas. So those are some things you can adjust. All right, I'm going to move this guy back over here. Eyedropper tool, if you hit the letter I, notice we have our sampler again. Okay. If I want to go back to my brush tool, I hit the letter B, back to brush. The next one is the opposite of the B, which is the letter E, eraser tool. And with the eraser tool, I can erase a certain area. We're on the wrong layer right now. So here's our layers panel. If I go to the values, now I can erase that area away if I wanted to. I'm going to undo. I'm going to deselect. If you ever needed to use it, G for the paint bucket. It's going to also pick up the gradient tool. So a lot of these you can see little teeny arrows down in the bottom corner, and if I hold on that, I can pick between the gradient tool or the paint bucket tool. In this class, we'll definitely use the gradient tool more often. That's a great tool that we'll have later on when we start to do some landscapes and different other things on Project 5. O for the dodge tool. Dodge makes things lighter. The burn tool would make things darker. I don't usually use the dodge very much at all. T for the type tool, C for crop tool, S for clone stamp tool. Clone stamp tool is a good one for, let's say you took a picture with your phone and then you tried to put it on here and kind of make sure that it looks the same because you're going to send it in a portfolio. And we'll go through in class and do this one time just to show you how to do it. But the clone stamp tool can sample an area of your picture and then paint that sample onto an area in your picture, another area. So if you had an edge where it was like black, we can do it. Let's do it. Here's the clone stamp tool. Let's say I'm going to make my brush. Let's go with a brush first. We'll make it small. I'm going to sample this light color. I'm going to accidentally paint that. Let's go to the right layer. There we go. Let's say I painted this up in here. Ooh, I've got this little teeny area that looks like garbage, but I wanted to paint it so that it looks correct. Clone stamp tool. And if I get close to it, I might make it a little smaller. And I hit Alt, and then I have to click. And that tells me where to start sampling. And then I can paint, and it's going to paint what I have over to the side. So this is not, I'm going to do Alt down here and see what we can do. This is not working the same way. I must have hit some strange adjustments. But ideally, the clone stamp tool is going to paint something complex. So usually for me, I take a picture of my sketchbook. It's a little funky. It might be a curved page. There's a little area I need to cover up. I can sample from that image and paint onto that image. I might be doing it wrong because it's sampling from a different place. It definitely works best if it's one single flat image. And maybe that's what's going on and why it looks wrong. Other quick tips. If we're looking at this guy right here, if I hit Control Alt I, or if I'm on some Mac, it would be Command Alt I, I am going to get a little menu that helps me resize my image. This is super useful. Right now we know that our resolution is 132. Our whole size is 15 by 11. That's a pretty good size. It tells you the pixels up here. But there might be times where you need to print it out, and I'm going to tell you this on some of them. Your resolution needs to be at 300 pixels per inch. So if we change this to 300, notice how much bigger. This just got way bigger. It went from 9 megabits to 46, which is still fine. But it can be important to resize your image or have the right size before you jump into finishing something, especially if you're going to print it out. You want to always be at 300. So now you can see kind of more of the details. It resized the image, so I have to hit Control 0 to get back to that same size. Control L for levels. I choose levels over curves usually because I understand it better. Excuse me. Mr. Connor or Mr. Vitale or Mr. Pieko, I think they have more experience with the curves, so they will use that rather than levels. But if I wanted to adjust some of the values inside of this picture, you have a slider, and if I move the left slider closer to the peak of this first valley, it's going to make the darks darker. And if I made the one on the right slide to the lightest, it's just, you see how that just changed some of the range of values. It gets me more contrast. The blacks are blacker, the whites are whiter. That doesn't affect too much in something that's like black and white, like this image, but in something that's more of like a landscape or a portrait, you might choose to kind of go through and do that. Usually I'm using levels to adjust a picture that I take, a photograph of artwork or something else, and then I'll go through and finish that and say okay. Undo, if I want to undo that levels, Control Z, I'm back. If I want to undo some other things, Control Z, Control Z. There's it's fixing all those different resizing, all the little painting I did. Now we get right back to the good old image that we had before. Control T, free transform. That can be important. You might use that in a lot of places. So right now it just has that background brought in. If you needed to resize something, you wanted to kind of go through and change how it looked, I can make it bigger or smaller with Control T. I could stretch it out a little bit. So transform is a very important one that we'll use. If I go to the full view, let's hit that. So that like locked it in. You can find it under Edit. Free transform is this one. You might scale it, rotate it, skew it, proportion. The best one that I usually end up using sometimes is a warp, and that would allow you to kind of click and drag different parts of this into a different shape. Maybe you wanted a little more expression in your T-Rex look. You wanted to stretch it out a little bit and get it a little more organic after you made something so stiff. That's how you would do it, is with a warp. And as soon as you either click this check or hit enter, it locks in what you just did. But Control Z, we undo. Control Z, we undo. Let's see if there was one more. I don't think there was one more. Oh, Control U, saturation. So that's not going to work for this one. Let's open another one. I'm looking at these. I gotta just open my own. Mostly I was grading last night, so I'm mostly looking at all of your projects. So let's move down to something that's not your projects. Just something with color. Where's mine? There we go. So if I want to change some of the saturation, the color, and the look of this, I'm going to make it big, Control 0. If I hit Control U, I get this new dialog box where I have adjustments that I can make to the hue. So that's the color family. So if I slide this one way or another, it gets greener, it gets purpler, then it moves over to a more reddish. And you can kind of scroll through different looks for the color. If you get back to 0, then it'll be back to more or less where it was. Saturation is how bright and intense it is. I can take this and make it very bright and very strong color, or I can slide it down and make it very kind of grayish, or even get it to the point where it's just black and white. Pull all the color out completely. And then lightness is going to make the image darker or make it lighter. That can be helpful, like if you're going to draw a new version on top of something, you can bring the lightness up quite a bit. This, I believe, is just one flat image, yeah. So it's anything I adjust, it's just doing that. If I had the figure in this picture separated from the background, I could control one versus the other, and it might be helpful. So if I make it lighter and a different color and change the hue, now this is my new look, and if I like it, I can keep it. If I don't like it, I can undo it. Maybe I want it to look like this, but maybe not. I could always do this. File, export, quick export as a PNG. So that would give me the flat image exactly as it is for the moment. And if I do that and then I hit save, let's call this let's click on here. Come on now. Copy 2. So I had to name it something different real quick. So there it is. And then I can hit Control Z. I can undo it. And now I have a new version where I could open up that other version as well. And I could have both. And that's just a quick way to get a different version and save it out and keep that, and then also keep the original. anytime you save as a quick PNG, it's going to be a flat image. So there's not going to be any layers, which could be interesting because you might pull a couple layers out of something, save that image, and then stick that in a folder. And you can always come back to it. You could also copy a layer if you wanted to, but I knew I wanted to hit undo, so that's why I saved it. I think that's about it for all these different ones here. So I'm going to end this real quick, but that was a walkthrough. I'll maybe try to do a different walkthrough of the different parts here. Layers panel, that's probably our most important. Brush panel is also important. Here's our tools panel. We'll talk about workspaces. Usually it starts in essentials. I almost always move it to painting because it prioritizes the tools that we're going to use more rather than sticking with the ones. And let me move this because it might be below my thing. Workspaces, where is it? Well, anyway. Thank you for joining, and we'll see you next time.